If you saw yesterday's video, then if you're new to watching me and you saw yesterday's video, this is the part where I say, now that you know the first part of that particular story, at this point there's no turning back. So, to catch up from yesterday, for 31 years, it was believed that I was on the autism spectrum. And for like maybe 3/4 of middle school, and up until my halfway through junior in my high school year, I was in special ed. It was during this time, particularly around my sophomore year, that's when I started contemplating suicide. Now, this is the story of what made me change my mind. And I will be getting to that in a little bit. But you need to understand the events leading up to that moment. So, with that said, it was my senior year at Horseheads. And I played football for Horseheads. And we got the brakes beat off us by this one team called Fayetteville Manlius. Like, they beat us like 38-3. It was awful. We were terrible. So I drive back home. Obviously, I'm 17 years old. I still live with my parents because, I'm in high school. And pull out in the driveway. And then my mom proceeded to walk up to me to where my car was. And it was then she suggested that I repeat my senior year to go to Trinity Pauling. Now, this is the part where I have to say, like, my parents really don't have a good sense of timing, because you gotta remember, I got up really early to prepare for the football game that we just got royally beaten at. Not to mention, we're going to church in a couple hours, which I really, at the time, wasn't a big fan of going to church. So my mom walking up to me saying that I should repeat my senior year, I'm just thinking, do I look like I want to talk about do I look like I'm in any position to talk about my future right now? I mean, again, timing. But I heard her out, and as time went on, and I actually got to see, I got to visit Trinity Pauling, which, fun fact, when I first got there, I'm like, is this a college? Because anyone at Trinity Pauling knows Cluett Building is a very beautiful building. Like, it looks like it could be at a college. That's how beautiful it is. Anyway, as time went on, superficially, there were two reasons why I wanted to go to Trinity Pauling. One was to impress a girl that I really liked, specifically my date for junior prom. The other reason was because there was someone who for years I could never beat, and I thought Trinity Pauling would finally give me the edge on him. Deep down, on the other hand, that's when I started to come up with the idea that, you know what? If I commit suicide, I could do it at Trinity Pauling. I mean, I'm in a completely new area. Nobody knows me. They're certainly not going to miss me if I'm gone. Why not? So then came September 2nd, 2008. The day that I went to Trinity, my first day of going to Trinity Pauling. And in the days leading up to going, I didn't really feel one way or the other emotionally, largely because of the whole contemplating suicide thing. It wasn't until we're on the highway on 17 and we're at that part of the highway that's overlooking the city of Elmira. In fact, okay, I could actually almost see where that part of the highway was from here. So yeah, not very far. And I get a call from my grandmother Rose, my grandmother on my father's side, who sadly passed away in April of 2024. And it was hearing her voice that made me start crying. Because deep down, it might just be the last time I ever hear her voice. Now, when I got to Trinity Pauling, almost from the minute I got there, I was put to work. Like within several hours after arriving at Trinity Pauling, I had my very first cross-country practice. I had to do cross-country because they already had their 4 postgraduates for football. And, I did a lot of running and training for cross-country before summer began. So it's not like I went in completely out of shape. But from that moment on, I quite literally and figuratively hit the ground running. I was doing cross-country. I was in the fall production of Black Comedy. And remember, I am at prep school. It is school. I have work to do, homework and such. So, long story short, I grew to be so incredibly busy that I completely forgot what my objective was. Days, weeks, months went by, and we're already at the Fall Athletic Honor Awards, which was a few days before Thanksgiving break. And by this time, my grades were pretty solid. Again, we were getting ready for the fall production of Black Comedy, which I would eventually do really well in. And most importantly, I actually won an award for how good I was doing in cross country. Now, for some context, you got to remember, when I played football for horses, I was a lineman. Like, we're one of the bigger guys. Running isn't really, being able to run for long distances isn't really supposed to be our thing. I mean, I wound up making the top 7. Like, those are the people that go to the varsity races. I made the top 7, and I was a lineman. Like, I should have no business doing that good whatsoever. But throughout that season, whether I realized it or not, I was fighting tooth or nail to stay in the top 7, and I did. Let's be real. I wasn't like fast or nothing, Trust me, there was several races I really almost did come in dead last. But top 7 still top 7. And, at the Fall Athletic Honor Awards, I get this award. I'm standing in front of, all of, my fellow Trinity Pauling students, or what we call ourselves brothers. They're applauding me. I never got any of this kind of recognition at Horseheads. And you also have to remember, at that time, I really was extremely proud of myself. I really was. But deep down, I thought, this isn't going to last. I mean, with Thanksgiving break coming up, and then soon after winter break coming up, everyone's going to forget, and, everyone's not going to care anymore. They're not going to remember what you did or whatever. So, at that point, I went back to thinking about, contemplating suicide, to the point where I knew I was going to do it. I just didn't know when or how at that time. The when, I eventually came to the conclusion that I should probably do it after winter break, because, it would have been one last Christmas with the family, one last New Year's with the family. My birthday is on December 28th, so we would have celebrated me turning 19 at that time. So, throwback, in January 2009, and at that point, that's when I was going to do it. As opposed to how, listen, it was only by the grace of God. I have no clue how to tie a noose. Like, at Trinity Pauling, your only real solid options are jumping out of the fourth story of Cluid Building, or going into the pond in the middle of winter and freezing to death. Like, those are pretty much. I mean, by the way, don't ever think about doing that, please. I mean, for reference, at Horseheads, whenever I had to go to the special ed classroom, for lunch and group sessions and whatever, like, I would ask to go to the bathroom, probably because I had to go to the bathroom, but also because I need to get away from there even for 5 minutes. And in that particular bathroom, it's on the second story at Horseheads. Like, they always kept, like, the window open. I'm not kidding when I tell you that I pretty much quoted Squidward from SpongeBob when I would look out the window and say, I wonder if a fall from this height would be enough to kill me. So yeah, that really is true. So I was supposed to commit suicide in January of 2009. And it's now December of 2025. So the real question is, like, what happened? What made you change your mind and decide you didn't want to do it anymore? Well, it happened on this very day, 17 years ago. And to this very day, I remember absolutely everything I did that day. Now, when I first got to Trinity Pauling, I did cross country, but the real reason I was there was for wrestling. And this would be years before Horseheads was as good at wrestling as it is now. So, we never got to go to any of the big tournaments or much less a dual meet tournament. And it was December 14th, 2008, where we went to the Loomis Chaffee dual meet tournament, which my very first dual meet tournament, a brand new experience for me. On top of that, it was also going to be the first time that my father was going to see me wrestle for the blue and the gold. That's Trinity Pauling's colors, blue and gold. On top of that, one of the people I was going to wrestle was someone that I had lost to in the Canterbury Christmas Invitational a week before in sudden death. And he was actually from one of Trinity Pauling's biggest rivals, Avon Old Farms. So I get a rematch with this kid. I'm at a dual meet tournament, first dual meet tournament I've ever been to. And my father is watching me wrestle for the first time for Trinity Pauling. There was no way I was going to let this opportunity pass me by. And I didn't. My first match of the day was a forfeit. My second match of the day was against the kid from Avon Old Farms. And I beat him, and I never lost to him again. Actually, I should probably point out, I got to know that kid throughout the season. He was a really nice guy. I actually kind of wonder how he was doing sometimes, because he really was a sweet guy. Anyway, I got tech followed by some tall, lanky kid from Jersey, and I beat a kid from I was 3-1 throughout the day. My final match was against Brunswick, a kid from Brunswick, and I beat him. Pinned him, I believe. I think I did. I forget. Anyway, so point is, I had a really great day of wrestling. My dad took me back home because, parents show up, they're allowed to take you back to Trinity Pauling. We went to Putnam Diner for dinner, which is one of those really cool diners where, it's breakfast, lunch, dinner all day. It's a huge menu. It's actually a really great place. Highly recommend you check it out if you're in that area. I mean, it shaped up to be a pretty great day. Which sounds great, but I'm sure some of you listening are probably thinking, I don't see how that changed your mind about suicide. It's also at this point I wish the story ended there. But it doesn't. Because the next day arrived. Now, the plan was I was going to do some work, spend the day with my father, stuff like that. So I get up, go down to the den of Dunbar Dormitory, because I was in Dunbar Dormitory then, and I'm laying on the couch watching TV, and all of a sudden my dorm parent walks in, who was actually the varsity soccer coach and one of the track coaches. He was my dorm parent and an English teacher as well. And he tells me that I have to head over to the chapel. We weren't supposed to have, sometimes we would have Sunday chapel. It was really just a means for the staff to keep tabs on who didn't go home for the weekend and stuff like that. But, we weren't supposed to have Sunday chapel this particular weekend. Okay, I trust my dorm parent. I'll head over to the chapel and see what's going on. And since Dunbar was very much close to the chapel, and if you guys know me, you'd probably know that I was one of the first people there. I remember sitting down and a bunch of us pouring in. And I specifically remember one particular friend of mine who was actually in my theater class, he was from Canada, and he himself had a naturally pale skin complexion, but this time it looked really different. Again, he may have had a pale complexion already, but he had looked like he had just seen a ghost. He saw something truly horrifying. I didn't think of it at that moment. And then our headmaster arrives and gets up to the podium in the chapel and starts talking. I, for the life of me, could never be able to repeat everything he said, with the exception of, hence, what this video is about. And that was, one of our brothers had died last night. His name was Andrew Einstein. Just that shock of, did that really just happen? I could sense within that chapel the collective, asking of numerous questions is that really true? Did this just really happen? He's got to be kidding, right? Stuff like that. Because, I mentioned earlier, when I was at Trinity Poly, things are going pretty well for me. But Andrew Einstein, on the other hand, you could have argued he was the most popular person there at that. I'm not even kidding. He actually also did cross country. He was my teammate for cross country. And I won what was called the Sean McCabe Award for cross country. He won the coach's award. Because he was arguably the fastest runner on the team. And he was a postgraduate just like I was. He was actually there for lacrosse. And speaking of lacrosse, for all intents and purposes, Trinity Poly lacrosse is huge. But this was right after Trinity Poly had just won New England's for lacrosse. And for those of you who don't know, that would be the equivalent of, winning New England's for Trinity Poly is the equivalent of, say, Horseheads or Elmira or Corning winning states. This was huge. And, Andrew Einstein was a great lacrosse player. And I feel like you need to mention this part. Ladies, since he was from South Carolina, he did have the accent. Ladies love the accent, apparently. And I'll actually never forget the one time I ever made him, he was nice to me, but I'll never forget the one time I ever made him laugh. were doing our warm-ups for cross-country, because again, we were cross-country teammates. And we were coming up with like names for some of the dormitories at Trinity Pauling. And there was this one dorm called Barstow. And so I came up with Barstoners. And Andrew Einstein was the only one who really laughed at that. Needless to say, he was a very popular guy. So the fact that he wound up committing suicide, and to this day, we know what he wound up doing. He hung himself. Again, it's by the grace of God, I have no idea how to tie news. His reasons, though, we don't know for sure. I mean, we've heard several things, like it was because of family troubles, girlfriend troubles. We do know that he may or may not have overdosed on Xanax, which, for those of you who don't know, Xanax can give you really powerful suicidal thoughts if you overdose on it. So, there you go. For the next several days, and keep in mind, this was like a few days before winter break started. We, we have like a bunch of services for Andrew. We're like talking about him a lot. But it was that last major funeral service that we had for him on campus. Which, interestingly enough, this funeral service had both the priest, the school chaplain, our priest, and a rabbi, because his mother was Episcopalian. Trinity Pauling is an Episcopalian school, and his father was Jewish. Granted, with a name like Einstein, I should have probably pieced that together, but I didn't know that then. I remember walking out of the chapel due to what happened, and between the school a cappella group, the Trinitones, singing the alma mater, and everyone around just feeling the emotion of everything. Like, I'm seeing, like, guys who are, for all intents and purposes, bigger and stronger than I am. And I'm seeing, like, breaking down, they're crying, they had each other's backs. That sound familiar? And, I thought I had every right to, given what I told you yesterday, and given how I was feeling at that time, like, I had every right to do what Andrew did. But I didn't. And so I asked myself, if that had been me who had done this, would that elicit a similar reaction to what everyone else is doing now? Are my brothers going to weep for me like they're weeping for Andrew? I don't know. And thankfully, I'll never know the answer to that. Because the second thing I was thinking of at that time is, I can't do that to these guys. I can't do that to them. So that's why I changed my mind. While it's very tragic that Andrew Einstein had died, he saved my life. My brothers, through their collective unity, saved my life. Which is why I will always, more importantly, just wear this ring, but I'll always keep Trinity Pauling. Like, a few months ago, I said that Trinity Pauling is my second alma mater. And it is. Because that place quite literally changed my life. It saved my life. I'm here because of that place. And I should probably say, like, this story has a happy ending, but sadly it really doesn't. Listen, we all had to go home for winter break just being in shock of what happened. Not to mention, eventually we had to come back for winter break, and everyone knows how cold and depressing January is. Believe me, it was actually a pretty brutal winter. Like, I remember walking to the wrestling room, and just every day a gigantic gust of cold wind just hits my face every day. Ugh. Sadly, that was my only real route to get to the wrestling room, so I didn't have a choice. Not to mention, I still had to deal with one particular student who, and I actually forgot to say this yesterday. There was one student who I swear was probably the meanest person ever, and I'd ever known in my entire life, where he, he figured out that I was on the spectrum at the time. Granted, it's not like I told him, because why would I ever do that to myself? He figured out the old-fashioned way, i.e., he guessed and he rolled with it. Again, because he was bigger and stronger than everybody else, his word is law, so... not that a lot of people actually listen to him, but still. So I had to deal with that guy. I also had to deal with one of my teammates taking a video of me allegedly crying because I was just taken out of a chokehold. When I wasn't crying, I was literally swallowing a part of a Quaker Oats Chewy bar. But you choke someone, their face is going to get beet red, and they thought I was crying. So needless to say, I had to put up with my fair share of nonsense after the fact. Not to mention, for many years, arguably even now, I've gone through life not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And it's not like things get any easier. As of now, 3 of my 4 grandparents are gone. I made 3 attempts to try and qualify for the Boston Marathon, and they didn't work out. I struggled all throughout, college. I barely had maybe a 2.7 something average all together or something. I don't know. I sucked at college, the point being. But you can't have any of that bad without a lot of good. And trust me, there is a lot of good, and the amount of good only gets greater with each passing year. Just take in the beginning of that time, for instance. I may have struggled through college, but I graduated. I may not have qualified for the Boston Marathon, but I ran 4 marathons at all. Not to mention, during those 4 years running those marathons, I also did 3 100-mile bike rides for charity for the Tour de Cuca. The first 2 years were for JDRF, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and the next 2 years were for the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. And not to mention, my brother, got engaged, he got married, he became a father, which in turn makes me an uncle to 3 beautiful nephews. Not to mention, my opinion for weddings overall has greatly changed. Shout out to both of my cousins who got married over the last couple of years, as well as one particular wedding I went to also in 2022 in September. Not to mention all of the TV shows I've been able to watch, the movies I got to see 4 Avengers movies. And there's going to be one coming out in 2026 or 2027 or something like that. I don't know. The list of things that I've been able to do simply for not committing suicide is so incredibly great that it would take probably several videos or one very, very, very long one to quantify just what I've done. So, sorry, I'm trying to think if I forgot anything, because I always wind up doing that. If any of my brothers are watching this, saying thank you really wouldn't be enough, considering the life I mean, listen, my life may not be perfect. And yeah, it is kind of sad that I get to relive some of this by sharing it with you all. But you know what? I get to. Let me repeat that. I get to say that. Think about that for a second. Again, I got to graduate from college. I got to run those 4 marathons and do those 100 miles for the Tour de Cuca. I got to see my brother get married and have a family. I got to live on my own in this apartment. Heck, I could even simplify saying I get to wear this Santa hat, and have all these Christmas decorations up for this time of year. I get to do all of that. And not to mention, I've gotten to meet so many wonderful people who honestly are what make life worthwhile for me. Also, this is probably the part where I should say where, for those of you of my brothers who remember Andrew Einstein, I think it's pretty safe to say that he's never going to be forgotten, for sure. As for those who know me that obviously never knew Andrew, I will tell you this. If you ever got to know Andrew, you would have loved him. Absolutely. Because he really was, he was the nicest one of us all. He was. It's very rare that you find anyone who is that nice and that well liked, but also being of strong mind, body, and spirit. And it really did look like Andrew did have that. And I mean, I just said earlier, I remember everything I did that day. I remember where I was that entire weekend. Obviously, if I knew then what I knew now, of course I would try and make a difference. Sure. But that's not how life was meant to go, unfortunately. So, these last 17 years have not come without their challenges. But they also haven't come out without their moments of greatness either. In fact, take what happened on this day last year, for instance. I mentioned that on December 14th, 2008, I went to my very first dual meet wrestling tournament. December 14th, 2024, it was also a Saturday. And I went to the first Horseheads wrestling tournament I've been to since I wrestled. A couple friends of mine had kids who were wrestling, so I got to see them wrestle. All right, full circle moment right there. And again, December 14th, 2008, it was a Saturday. December 14th, 2024, also a Saturday. The coincidence? I think not, right? So life has been, life has been a roller coaster, to be sure. But you better believe, for as low as the lows were, there were some pretty high highs. And I get to say I got to experience all of that. Just like I get to tell this story right now. Which reminds me, I am once again beyond humbled that I was able to share this story with all of you. I am forever hopeful that you hear this story, apply it to your life. Because, listen, it's December, it's the holiday season. This can be a very depressing time of year. And always remember that, as I've said numerous times, if you ever want to talk, I'm always going to be here to listen. And much like my brothers had for me and each other during those several days before winter break in 2008, I will always have your back. So take care, be safe, and again, in the words of my Perspectives on Drugs teacher at Horseheads, make good choices.